Entertainment Safari.
Welcome to Entertainment Safari with Steve and Izzy. I'm Izzy, and that's Steve.
Hi.
Great intro.
Thanks.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Entertainment Safari, your podcast for all your entertainment needs. We've got a special episode today, so we're so glad you're here with us.
Yeah, it's been a very entertaining June, so we want to share some of the movies, especially one movie that we really enjoyed and feel like you would be remiss if you didn't check this one out.
Right. We have seen several good movies in the theaters over the last couple of weeks. It's been a while since we've put a podcast out, but we've got a good one today. Today we're going to be talking about Elvis.
Yeah, I think the first thing that people go into with Elvis is usually his musical career, but this movie did a great job at capturing kind of the pop icon that was Elvis. So I think they did a great job with it. I think, obviously, whenever you get someone as famous as Tom Hanks to agree to take a lesser role, I think that shows how much of a passion project it was for him, especially.
For sure. I think Tom Hanks is one of the things that was my favorite part of the movie. Kind of a hidden gem aspect, because when you're going to see Elvis, you're going to learn about Elvis, right? And his journey and his life and all of his things. But then to get Tom Hanks on top of it, Tom Hanks is a national treasure. And then to kind of see him be the bad guy, more or less. And he definitely wasn't the hero of this story, which more oftentimes than not in Tom Hanks stories, he is. So I thought it was awesome to get to see him in that role as well.
Yeah, I got a lot of vibes of Hitchcock, because Hitchcock wasn't at all afraid of pushing the envelope when it came to his actors or actresses, especially his actresses. And he'd be pretty brutal and exacting when he wanted a certain shot, and he'd keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So Tom Hanks's portrayal reminded me a lot of Alfred Hitchcock in the way he played him.
Interesting.
Even the mannerisms and some of the things, because Hitchcock was a foreign guy as well. So
interesting. I saw something that this was what they were filming in Australia in 2020 when Tom Hanks got COVID. And
what's with that? A lot of films, I've noticed a lot of the films are filming in Australia. I wonder if the overhead's just really good and they just have more cool places to work. I'd be curious why that is.
And I think they offer some really good incentives as far as the tax breaks and things like that, filming there.
I'm sorry, I totally...
I got sidetracked.
I totally obliterated your question there.
No, but they were filming this in 2020 when, and it kind of snowballed the shutdown. And they were unsure if it was going to get made. The director was, because when it got shut down, they didn't know how long they were going to get shut down or if they were going to have the money to finish it like they did. And Tom Hanks, from what I heard, Tom Hanks stepped up and really made sure they got back on track. And the director said they came in on time and under budget. And he credited Tom Hanks for part of that. So I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, Tom Hanks, has always amazed me because he is very much, from what I've read and what I've heard, he's very much a collaborator where he'll pull his actor buddies and they'll do Shakespeare and he'll be actually cajoling and persuading them oh yeah, it'll be great, it'll be fun, and they're like, sure, are you sure? It doesn't sound like something I want to do. And he's like, yeah, come down and it'll be a blast. And most of them are willing to do that, but sometimes you need someone to grease the wheels a little bit and be that collaborator and that encourager to be like, hey, this is a fun thing. And I'm sure a lot of those actors signed on because Tom Hanks was the one saying, oh, this will be fun. they're not doing it for a paycheck in that case. It's more just because they love the craft and enjoy fun like anybody else.
Now, before we go off on a Tom Hanks love fest, there was much more to Elvis than just Tom Hanks, and we loved it for many more reasons than that. So let's move off of Tom Hanks here. So, Steve, if we're moving off of Tom Hanks...
If we have to.
Let's talk about Elvis. And Austin Butler played a great Elvis, but talk to me about what you thought of Elvis's journey in the film.
Right. Yeah, the crazy thing is... I was very high on this film going in. I'm still very high on it now. I was scared to death for them during the opening phase, which I'd classify as their young Elvis phase. In that one, they pulled a lot of the influences that affected Elvis, whether it was the comic books with Captain Marvel or some of the church events that young Elvis would go to that were more charismatic.
B.B. King.
And some African-American singers, which you get a lot of that with Sinatra, where Sinatra would kind of go to these dive bars and listen to their deliveries and how they pronounce the words that get the most impact for the song. So Elvis obviously had a lot of that too. But the scary thing for me and why I was so worried for them in this young Elvis phase is I didn't feel like, oh, the king was here yet. I was like, okay, maybe they're slow playing it, but I kind of came here to see Elvis, not all these other entertainers making cameos and, doing their thing. So I was a little concerned for them during the young Elvis phase. Even Austin Butler, I was like, I don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off. But you do see a very unsure Elvis, where he's kind of in this family troupe, which is very common, and it is still today in a lot of small church deals, is you have these family troupes who are like entertainers. It's a very gypsy kind of lifestyle, where he's kind of being reassured by his mom and some other family friends in the opening act, but you definitely sense an uncertainty about Elvis, which I didn't know how it was going to play out. It's like, okay, well, is it just the way he's playing it? Is it just a phase in Elvis's journey, or is he going to be like this the whole movie? So that kind of concerned me. Then you go to kind of middle Elvis, where you have, the police riots in the South. You have the song, I think, that exemplified this was like, well, I'm evil, don't you mess around with me, kind of the Green-Eyed Lumberjack song. And I was like, okay, they're getting there, they're getting close, but I'm still not sure if this is going to be the Elvis movie to end all Elvis movies, because I think what you run into with Elvis, and we watched some of his older movies in kind of prep work to see the new Elvis movie, is you just have this very complex pop icon figure that has such a level of complexity that, with the exception of a few key people in history like Princess Diana or some of these other just larger than life figures, everybody has a different tact of what they want to see. But for me, what really stood out was kind of when you get to that, about the middle of the movie, I'd say, and then you see King Elvis, where he's doing his auditions for the Las Vegas casinos. It's primetime Elvis, and at that point, Austin Butler hooked me in, and I was like, wow, he pulled it off. The director was slow playing it. I was so concerned, but it just made that moment all the more sweet when I was like, okay, we have a winner. We have Elvis on the big screen. And that was an amazing experience.
Aw, good take. So would you say the slow build was worth it?
Oh, absolutely. At the moment, I would say oh, I'm gonna just hate the first part of this movie if it is a slow burn. But I think now that I know what's coming, and I had such a fun time being on pins and needles the first half of the movie, I think it's just gonna endure it all the more to me, I feel like.
Nice.
Okay, Izzy, so Elvis has a vast array of songs, from gospel to pop to rock and roll. I mean, pretty much all avenues of music, to some effect, have been influenced by him. How do you feel like the movie represented the king in the musical sense? Because that was a tough line to tread, because they did want to cover the movies, they did want to cover all these other things, and they did want to tell Elvis's overall story as a man, not just as an entertainer.
Right, and I think that was important. If we hadn't got any Priscilla or Lisa Marie, if we hadn't got any of the movies, if we hadn't got some of these other aspects, it would have been disappointing. So it was a lot to cover. That being said, if you don't work in some of the songs, you're going to be in trouble in an Elvis movie, because if you ask anybody on the street who is Elvis, they're going to say he's a singer, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure. So a lot to do, a lot to work in, but overall, I was impressed with what they did. Going in, I said that I would be happy as long as, or I wouldn't be disappointed as long as they played Can't Help Falling in Love. And the longer I went in the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, what if they don't work it in? I'm enjoying it. And then they worked it in a little bit, not quite as much as I was expecting. It was kind of done in a different way than some of the other songs. And so when they did that, I was like, okay, how do I feel about this?
Were you miffed?
A little bit, because I wanted, the full-blown thing. But looking back, I know why they did it that way. Like, they couldn't slow the pace down that much. So I'm glad that they did it the way they did it. And looking back now, it was kind of unfair of me to say, that was all I wanted from it. So looking back now, I did get a little bit of that song. And honestly, if you look at, I guess I'm not the best catalog of Elvis's music, but from my perspective and what I've heard, there was a well-rounded group of songs and representation of his music. And there was a little of this, a little of that. And I did feel like it represented Elvis. I liked and appreciated the way that they did the songs, in that they didn't play the whole songs, they didn't do full-on performances of one song. There was a lot of mashups, I felt like, but it didn't feel like that way when you were watching it. You felt like you were getting the songs. And I thought that was really well done.
Because they did have to cover, obviously, a lot of ground and tell a story and do these huge set pieces and do kind of the background finagling. So it almost amplified the drama, because you got to see Elvis on stage kind of putting on a show for everybody, and then you have the Colonel kind of in the background doing these shady deals and negotiating a price. So you definitely see different facets which wouldn't have been available if you had done a straight, we're going to show the concert.
Right. So I really liked the music in it. I would love to sit down with a soundtrack of it. And I think Austin Butler did a great job. From what I've heard, he did a lot of the singing, and it wasn't until the later years that they worked in a mix of Elvis recordings and his voice. And so I thought he did fantastic. And it was a good mix. Like I said, I'd love to, having just seen the movie once, I'd love to sit down with the soundtrack and really dig in a little deeper with it. But I really enjoyed the music. What about you?
What was your? I'll answer your question in just a second. What was your favorite song that they actually played?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I can.
Say
With
that.
with one watch, I don't know that I can say that. And now it's been a day or two since we've watched it.
Sure.
Um, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Mine would be the Unchained. There were two. There's one I'm not sure. I know it was the song he sang after Robert Kennedy was assassinated,
Oh yeah.
and that one was very good. And then naturally, Unchained Melody at the end had me
Yeah.
bawling at my eyes out at the end of the.
You got a good cry in.
I got a good cry in. Like if you need to clear the sinuses or just get rid of some emotional weight, that's a definitely good movie to see. I thought they did really good with the music. Were there a few that I was kind of like, come on, you can't even do a head nod to like Amazing Grace or Return to Sender?
Right. There were some that, there's going to be some that fall through the cracks and, don't make it. But I think that also goes to show just how many hits Elvis had.
Yeah, I mean, he just had one after another, and when you factor in that they were trying to kind of focus in on his career as a whole, as opposed to just doing the one shot, like, oh, here's an Elvis song, here's an Elvis song, here's an Elvis song. I did appreciate that they had the guts not to just do that, and then we just don't really get to enjoy anything.
Agreed. So, Steve, we mentioned you had a good cry there at the end, and this was definitely a story that had its darker side. Talk to me about how you felt about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, Izzy, is how Elvis is portrayed. I think if you ask a certain audience, if you ask more the pop culture, younger audiences, they're going to be, oh, he's in the musicals, oh, he's always singing with a guitar in one hand and has a pretty girl in a swimsuit on the other arm. So they'd be like, yeah, Elvis is kind of the good times, slick operator, kind of like Fonzie, Happy Days. Like he's a very smooth kind of cat, and that's the extent of it. Elvis, kind of shallow, but if you like that, it's okay. But the reality is quite different, and I think this movie captured that a lot, where you have a very damaged young man who had a tragic family life, where his mom was an alcoholic, and obviously he had his own.
He lost his mom very young, too.
Yeah, so you have this very tragic backstory already built in for Elvis, amplified by the fact that he has the struggles with his own family and fame and fortune, and I'm sure he was haunted a lot by his own family drama as far as, well, providing and how money should be spent and kind of the groupies and hangers-on he kind of had his whole life. So you just have this very sad, dark portrayal, but then what stands out even more is once he kind of gets to Las Vegas and he starts butting heads with his manager, Tom Hanks, the Colonel, you see a very strong-willed, super talented, super driven man who has this edge to him where it's like he's definitely been hardened from his previous experiences. So if Elvis feels like you're gonna cross him, or if you've betrayed him, or something's the intensity, especially in one of the scenes when he fires the Colonel, you could cut the edge with a knife as far as he goes from performing to stone cold face. We have a problem. I have a problem with you, Tom Hanks, and the king doesn't suffer any fools, so that you definitely get a fair portrayal, I think, of what Elvis was actually like, where it's like obviously a very proud person who has an intrinsic value system, who is used to getting his way, and I think that must have been very difficult, dealing with fame and also having the responsibilities with the family, which doesn't always get talked about how the damage usually doesn't just fall on you as a entertainer. It's the family who kind of pays the price as well, and we saw that a little bit with a different movie, not to venture too far, but we saw a Nolan Ryan documentary, which was wonderful as well, and Nolan's wife was like, she didn't know how much she'd have to share Nolan Ryan with the world, and how much baseball would be at the center of her life.
Right. I think that's a very nice transition, because I think both Nolan Ryan and Elvis, both movies we highly recommend, but in that regard, they were both trailblazers in their area of expertise.
Oh, absolutely.
In music and in entertainment and in sports and in baseball, as far as they didn't have that many people to look up to as far as making that much money. They were trailblazers in that regard, and two stories that ended very differently.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously. But if you're looking for a good movie to see and you can catch either one of those, we highly recommend both, because both are two very well done stories on two real life people that are just some good people.
Yeah. I mean, both were just so entertaining. And the fact that we got to see both of those in the span of probably a week or two, and we barely heard about the Nolan Ryan one right when it was showing, so it was just perfect timing.
Right.
All right, Izzy, we're about to hand out our reviews and hot tamale ratings. First off, who do you feel like would enjoy this movie? Who do you feel like maybe would have a tougher time with this movie?
I feel like a lot of people will enjoy this movie. If you are a film lover, this film was very well done. They did a lot of things that I haven't seen in very many movies, and so that...
Like with the shots?
With the shots, with some of the editing styles and some of the things that they did a lot of cool things with it. So if you're a film lover, for sure. If you're an Elvis lover, you've probably already seen the movie by the time we get this podcast put out. So I think those are two definite groups that would love to see it. If you're looking for a journey movie to tell... to hear a good story, and get from point A to point B, and a real life story, I think this is a movie for you. Honestly, I mean, young kids probably have a tougher time with this one. There are some thematics, and if they don't know who Elvis is, that's probably going to be difficult. But other than that, I'd recommend this movie to just about everyone. Wouldn't recommend it if you need a happy ending, but I would recommend this movie to many people.
Yeah, very good. I mean, like you said, there are definitely some movies where you need some life experience to fully appreciate the movie, and I think that kind of ties into what you mentioned with the young kids, where it's some old soul kids will still be able to appreciate it, but I do think it is more of an adult-oriented story who you kind of get the sense that you have some real-life experience and you've gone through not exactly the stuff Elvis has got, but some trials and tribulations and some hardships.
Right. There's nothing I wouldn't not show my kids. There are definitely some teachable moments in there. If you have, like you said, an old soul, or you have a child, or young preteen, that you want to teach and, show some things. There's nothing too crazy or anything like that.
There's nothing too risque. They definitely do the line well between risque and not too bad.
For sure. So, do you know how many hot tamales you would give Elvis?
I do. I would have to give it 5. I'm reluctant to hand out 5s, but this movie was everything I wanted it to be, and that's always a hard road to consider when you come into a movie with such high expectations and to have those expectations actually fulfilled. So I would have to give it a 5 out of 5.
I agree. I give it 5 hot tamales out of 5 too. It was just so good. It was everything we wanted it to be. And this will definitely be one that as soon as it comes out on DVD, we will be at the store.
Yeah, it's just such a good blend of kind of documentary, history, biopic, entertainment.
I think that's what I appreciated a lot, because in contrast to Facing Nolan, where that's a true documentary, Elvis, while it is kind of a documentary, it's not. It was very much a movie and an entertainment piece, while not being too, it was
dry.
Yeah, too dry or inaccurate. So it was just very well done.
So there you have it, our first multiple 5 out of 5 hot tamales. So if you don't like it, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Obviously, no one's wrong. Like, some people obviously will enjoy this movie more, and some people less. And I think the main thing, though, is as movie lovers, we do have to support these passion projects and these films getting made and going to the theaters to see them, because at the end of the day, the film experience is still, it takes so many talented people to do, and to not support that is just doing a disservice to yourself.
I agree, Steve. Now, I'm going to catch you off guard here.
Oh, yeah?
I want to do 2 things before we wrap up today's episode. Number 1, since we dropped in some Facing Nolan references there, and I don't think we're going to do a whole podcast episode, although I could, over Facing Nolan.
She's a Rangers fan.
I am. I'm a Rangers fan. I'm a baseball fan. But we'll save a baseball podcast for another time. I do feel like we should give Facing Nolan a hot tamales ranking.
Yeah?
I do.
You think fair's fair?
Fair's fair. We dropped some references out there. Let's give it our ranking as well.
Okay, so are we giving it a ranking as an overall movie, or as a documentary, or as... I feel like those are the 2. Overall movie or documentary, because I feel like those are 2 different scales. Because if you do documentary, it's gonna be very high up there, because it was so well.
I mean, it's tough because it is a true documentary, but we saw it in movie theaters. So...
You feel like it has to go past the test of everything else? Because, I mean, honestly, the best documentaries have to contend with that.
For sure. Let's put it in the movie category.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
How many hot tamales do you give it?
I'd give it a solid 4.
I'll give it 5. 5 hot tamales.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna do that.
I tried not to, but it was so well done. It was so good.
In your defense, it was a wonderful 2 pair of movies to see very close together.
Agreed. Now, to wrap up a podcast that is about Elvis here, let's give the viewers at home, our listeners, let's wrap up today's podcast talking about a couple of our favorite true Elvis movies, if they see Elvis in theaters and then want some more of the King, what movie would you recommend to them?
I think if you're looking, obviously I've not seen them all, Izzy.
Right? We looked it up the other day, and I think Elvis was in 41 movies. So we have some more work to do.
We have some more work to do. Out of the ones I've seen, if you're looking for a more action-y comedy with racing, I'd probably go Speedway. Speedway with Elvis was very good. If you want more of a dramatic, super serious Elvis role with some music in it, I'd probably go King Creole. And then if you wanted kind of more of a silly, fun movie, I don't want to steal all yours. You want to get one in there?
No, you're fine. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I'm probably going to steal one of yours. A funny, kind of more comical one, I'd probably go Tickle Me.
Tickle Me was very good. The other one that I would say, I'll just add this one. You weren't as crazy about it, but Girl Happy was very good. I enjoyed that one, and such a catchy song too. So there you go. Couple of 4 Elvis movies to look for and enjoy as well.
Yes, I mean, you get a new movie and then you get 4 old school movies if you really want to go down that Elvis rabbit hole. So there you go.
All right, any final thoughts, Steve, on Elvis or Nolan Ryan? 2 of the greats.
Yeah, they're great movies. You should definitely check out both of them. In a world where usually we get big blockbusters, these are 2 very more art housey films that are on a bigger scale that you just don't get to see every day. Usually you get 1 or 2 good biopics. Maybe you get 1 or 2 documentaries a year. So I would definitely recommend you checking both of those out if you're a music fan or if you're a baseball fan. They are can't misses.
I absolutely agree. That about wraps it up for this episode of Entertainment Safari. But we were talking earlier, we have several big things on the horizon as far as movies go.
We have lots of movies coming in July, and we're very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. We already have our tickets for Thor: Love and Thunder.
It's going to be so awesome. Taika Waititi, it's been too long, sir. It's been too long.
We're both excited for Minions: Rise of Gru. We've talked about seeing Mr. Malcolm's List and The Black Phone. And these are all just like that are hitting the theaters here this last week of June, first week of July. So some big movies to look forward to. And eventually, our Entertainment Safari will talk about more than just movies. We have a Friends podcast up our sleeve that we'll pull out at some point, because I made Steve watch Friends for the first time.
Yeah, it was a very good run. It was surprisingly painless.
Okay, don't give away too much. We'll stop you right there.
Okay.
Tell everyone bye, Steve.
Okay. Bye, guys.
We'll see you next time on Entertainment Safari.